We begin today the Gemara on the bottom of Daf Yutes Amud Beis, 5 lines from the bottom. The Gemara here is discussing the machlekes of Rab Shimon and the Rabbanan regarding Eishes Achiv Shleihaya Bailamai. According to the Rabbanan, even if the third brother was born after the second brother, Shimon did the Yibum, nevertheless, because originally she was Reuven's wife and then Levi was not alive, so therefore the concept of Eishes Achiv Shleihaya Bailamai still applies. And she's also to him. Ma Shenkein, Rab Shimon holds, because Levi was born after Shimon was miyavim her already, so therefore she's Shimon's wife, and Levi was alive when Shimon was alive. So at this point she has nothing to do with Reuven anymore. And therefore he says now, Eishes Achiv Shleihaya Bailamai does not apply anymore. Talk to Gemara. Yosef Rav Menashe bar Zvid, Kamed Rav Huna, v'Yosef v'Kamar. And he was sitting and he said as follows, my time with Rab Shimon. What is the reason for Rab Shimon that in such a case, when the third brother Levi is born after Shimon married Reuven's wife, why then does Eishes Achiv Shleihaya Bailamai not apply? Fragt the Gemara, my time with Rab Shimon. He's asking what's the reason for Rab Shimon's opinion. We already explained. He himself said the reason, and the Gemara said before, because when Levi is born, so now she's Shimon's wife. So if she's Shimon's wife, so she's mutter to him because this is the wife of Shimon, nothing to do with Reuven anymore. And Levi was not alive at all when she fell for Yibum to Shimon before the Yibum. And if he would have been born then, in between, so then it would be also for him. And it remains also forever. But he's born later. He's born after Shimon did the Yibum already. So now it's just Shimon's wife. That was the reason. We already explained this before. So what's he asking? What's the reason of Rab Shimon? Ella Zakta Gemara, my time with the Rabbanan. The question is the reverse. So what's the reason of the Rabbanan? Why, if Levi's born later, do we still say that we look at the history that she was once before Reuven's wife that Shimon now did Yibum for? Answers the Gemara, O Makra, because the pasuk says when you do Yibum, the lashon of the pasuk is v'lakcha loy liisha ve'yivma. Not only does it say it takes her as a wife, but it says ve'yivma. What does ve'yivma mean? Adayin yivumim harishayim aleha. Even after Shimon gets married to her, the status that she was Reuven's wife, that he did Yibum for her, that always remains. So if Levi is born after Shimon got married to her, she's still considered to be Reuven's wife that passed away. And therefore, since Levi was not alive in the lifetime of Reuven when she was married to Reuven, so that Isser of Eishes Achiv Shleihaya Bailamai still applies. So if so, Elo Ditnan, so this Mishnah that says, and we learned it before, that Kinsa Harehi Kishta L'chol Davar. Once he marries her, once the Yavam marries his Yevama, now she becomes like a regular wife for him. And what does this mean? This means, this teaches us, he can divorce her with a get, only a get, you don't need any chalitza, like a regular wife, and even more, umachzira, he's allowed to remarry her, even though she's really Eishes Achiv. But once that Eishes Achiv is mutter, because there was Yibum, so now, even after he divorces her, he can remarry her. So what do we see? That the status that she had in the beginning, that she was Reuven's wife, does not remain after he marries her. After he marries her, she becomes like his regular wife. So if so, that should apply here as well regarding Levi being allowed to do Yibum for this wife. It has nothing to do with Reuven anymore. Answers the Gemara. So the Gemara concludes the question, Hasam Nami, so there as well, Leime v'yibma. Why don't we apply this word v'yibma and say, Adayin yivum marishayim malah. That the first Yibum, the fact that this is a Yevame, that was once Reuven's wife, still is here, and therefore v'tibaya chalitza. So even after he marries her, she should still be considered to be a Yevame, and for a Yevame, a get is not enough. You should eat chalitza as well. After the Gemara, no, Shani Hasam. Over here, regarding this halacha, it's different. The Makra, because the pasuk says, Ulakacha loy leisha, that the Yavam takes the Yavama to be for him as a wife. And from this we learn, Kivin Shalakacha, once he married, once he did Yibum, Nasis ki ishtay l'chol davar. She becomes like his wife completely. No, so the Gemara now asks in the reverse. So, if so, hachanami, over here as well, regarding this halacha of Eishes Achiv Shleihaya Bailamai, so you explain the reason of the Rabbanan, that she's still a Yevama. She's still connected to the fact that she was once Reuven's wife. But over here you should say the same thing. No, once Shimon marries her, So now she's totally Shimon's wife, nothing to do with Reuven. Answers the Gemara, no, but Kastav Rachmana v'Yivma. We have the pasuk of v'Yivma that regarding this halacha, it teaches me that the status that she had before still remains, and therefore she will be asa to Levi, to the new brother. Frag the Gemara, Umar Isa. What do you see to darshan the psukim this way? That you're using the drasha Olakacha Leili Isha to say that in a regular case of a Yavam, when he marries the Yevame, so then he doesn't need Chalitza, and she's not a Yevame anymore. And why over here, regarding Eishes Achav Shlehaya by Lamai, are you darshaning this L'chumre to say that she still is a Yibum, she's still a Yevame, that she was once Reuven's wife? And for the Gemara, Mistavre, it's logical to say, Shadi Hetere Ahetere. The pasuk, which is coming to say a heter, that you only need a get and you don't need chalitza, and there is a lot of remarrier. So you put that drasha of the pasuk on the case of a heter. What does it mean, the case of a heter? In the case where you have the heter of Yibum, a brother that was alive when the other brother was alive, and he's doing the Yibum, the heter. So regarding that case, we add and we say that we apply the drasha of L'kachal Elisha to tell you the heter, that then if he wants to divorce her, he doesn't need chalitza anymore. So it's mistaber to put the drasha of the heter on a case where he's allowed to marry her. And Vishadi Isura a Isura. And the drasha of the Yivma, which is coming to say a Isser, that she still is a Yivame, so it makes sense to apply that to the case of Eishes Achav Shlehaya by Lamai, that we continue the Isser, even in a case where Levi is born later after Shimon married her. Now the Gemara comes back to Rab Shimon's Shitteh, that says that because Levi was born later, after Shimon married her, so the fact that she was once before Reuven's wife doesn't matter anymore. According to Rab Shimon, that said, since now he comes and he finds her beheter. Now she's Shimon's wife and he was alive when Shimon was married to her. And for him, there was no Isser at all from before, when she was Reuven's wife, when Reuven passed away, because then he wasn't alive, so he has no connection to that at all. So if that's the basis of what Rab Shimon holds, if so, Ela meyato, achaysai mimai. So say the same thing regarding a sister. You have a sister, it's a sister from your mother, you only share the same mother. Shenasa achiv me'aviv, and this sister got married to your brother. And now, v'achakach noiladoch, and now only after that was the brother born. Okay, so in other words, Reuven married this girl, and she is his brother's sister only with the mother. So that's why he's able to marry her. And then, when was this other brother born? Shimon, when was he born? He was only born later, after Reuven married her. And then Reuven passed away, so maybe we should say, Tisyabim, that Shimon should be allowed to do Yibum for her sister. Why? Why should he be allowed to do Yibum for her sister? Why can't you say the same thing over here, that when Shimon is born, since his sister is already married to his brother, and once he's married to his brother and his brother passes away without any children, now there's a mitzvah of Yibum. So if there's a mitzvah of Yibum, since from the moment he was born, she was already married to his brother, and he passes away, and now there's a mitzvah of Yibum, so therefore the fact that there's an Isser of her being a sister does not apply anymore, because there's a mitzvah of Yibum over here. Why should I not say such a svara? So the Gemara answers on this right away, but Isser achaysai lehecha nozal. Yeah, there's a mitzvah of Yibum, but she is his sister. And we have already learned before, in a case where it's an erva, where it's your sister, there's no mitzvah of Yibum b'chlal. So how could you say such a thing? Oh, but here the Gemara is leading up to this point. So if you say that over there, when there's a Issa erva, so the mitzvah of Yibum does not apply. Even if he's born later, when the mitzvah of Yibum would be in place, it doesn't matter. She is his sister, she was his sister, she is his sister, so it makes no difference. If so, Nami, over here as well, Isser Achiv Shalehaya Ba'olam Lehechan Azal. This Isser, that this is the wife of his brother, even though Hitaka was not in the world together with her. He wasn't alive when she was married to his brother before. But to where does that Isser go? What the Gemara is asking is, if for him the mitzvah of Yibum does not apply because he was not alive when Reuven was married to his wife, so if so, for him, this woman is a Eisha Sachiv, which is a Issa Erva, which is a Issa Karis. So if the mitzvah of Yibum does not apply, that means she's an Erva. So even if Levi, the third brother, was born later after Shimon married her, but she was once the wife of Reuven, And for him, there's no mitzvah of Yibum over there, because he wasn't alive then. So if so, the Isser of Eishes Achiv should apply forever. Just like you're telling me regarding a sister, that the erva of the sister remains, and the mitzvah of Yibum does not apply. So over here, if she was once before Reuven's wife, you can't tell me that this is a history that's not negayet. Befeidish is negayet. She was once Reuven's wife, and therefore there should be no mitzvah of Yibum for him. And for the Gemara, it's not the same thing. Hi, isura de les be hetere, les lei hetere. This, the isser of the fact that she is your sister, is a kind of isser that there's never a hete for this. This is not something that the Torah was never matter, that a sister, in any case, you should be allowed to marry. So therefore, the fact that you were born later, once the mitzvah of Yibum was here, doesn't change the fact that she's your sister. But hi, isura de islei hetere. This isser, that this is your brother's wife, that it's Eishes Achiv, that's a kind of Isser that's not always in place. Depends. When there's a mitzvah of Yibum, there is no Isser of Eishes Achiv. There is no Kodesh of Eishes Achiv. It's a kind of Isser that changes. And therefore over here, what we say is, since you were not alive when Reuven passed away, Shimon was the one that was alive, and for Shimon, that Isser of Eishes Achiv did not apply. That Isser was mutter for him, Adarabah was a mitzvah of Yibum for him. So once for Shimon, that Isser of Eishes Achiv of Reuven did not apply, and Shimon was allowed to be Miyabimer, so now when Levi is born after Shimon is Miyabimer, so for her, that Isser of Eishes Achiv, because of the fact that she was once married to Reuven, is not applicable. V'haraya, for Shimon, you see that Isser went off because Shimon was allowed to do Yibum. So this is a different type of Isser. It's not like an Isser of a sister. It's an Isser of Eishes Achiv that in the case of Yibum, which is what happened over here, that Shimon is Miyabimer, that Isser does not apply. So once it does not apply, and now Levi is born, this is a regular wife of Shimon, and Levi can go ahead and do Yibum. Okay, Dr. Heilige Mishnah, Klal Omru Bi Yevamos. So here the Mishnah is going to say a klal regarding Yibum, including some of the halachas that we learned before, and some new halachas. So the klal that it says regarding Yevamos is as follows. Kol, the Bach's guidance over here, Kol shi surah is a erve, if the Isser is an erve, the Yevamos is an erve for you. Then, lo chiletzes, v'lo misyabemes. There's no chalitza and no Yibum. That's the first Mishnah that we learned in the Masechta. Now the Mishnah adds, Isser mitzvah. If it's the Isser of this Yevamos is only Isser of a mitzvah, which as the Gemara will explain means, or the Mishnah actually explains, that this means a Isser mid'Rabbanan, a Erva mid'Rabbanan, or Isser Kedusha, which as the Mishnah will explain means an Isser of a Lav, then Chaletzes v'lo b'syabemes. Then there's only Chalitza but no Yibum. Sagt the Mishnah weiter, Chaysa shehi yevimta. If the sister is a Yevama, what does this mean? So as Rashi here says in the Gemara's Maskana, the Gemara explains that we're talking about two brothers that passed away. So and these two brothers were married to two sisters. So usually, as we learned before, there's a problem of achais zikukasa. You can't do yibum for either one of them. But if one of them was an erve, so therefore there's no mitzvah of yibum for one sister, so now you can do yibum for the other sister, because it's not a achais zikukasa. For the other one, there's no mitzvah of yibum at all. So in such a case, you can do either chalitza, that is, for this one you can do chalitza or yibum. Now the Mishnah explains, Isser mitzvah, what's the Isser? What does Isser mitzvah mean? Shniyais midivrei seifrem. The arayis midrabanan that are called shniyais, that Chachamim said that are asa. Kedusha, what's the Isser of Kedusha? Almana l'kohen gadol, and almana that's married to get married to a kohen gadol. Grusha v'chalutza l'kohen hedyet, or a grusha or a chalutza for a kohen hedyet. Umamzeres and nesina liYisrael, bas Yisrael l'nosan umamzer, or a bas Yisrael to get married to a nosan and a mamzer. These are all cases which are a Isser lav, and by a Isser lav, so you can't do yibum, but you could do chalitza. As the Gemara will learn out and explain why this is. Zok the Gemara klal. The Mishnah says it is a klal here. La suye mai. Whenever it says in the Mishnah klal, it's coming to add something in this klal. What is it coming to add? It's coming to add the halacha of a tzaras islandness. Okay, the Ravasi, like Ravasi. What did Ravasi say? We learned this before. Ravasi said that the whole mitzvah of Yibum only applies, like it says in the pasuk, Asher Teiled, that she should give birth from this wife. But if she's an islandness, so then the whole mitzvah of Yibum does not apply. And therefore the erve of Eishes Achiv comes back, and therefore there's no yibum, there's no chalitza, and there's also for the tzara also not. That's what Rav Asi said, and that's what the Mishnah is saying. In this klal, when it says Issa Erve, it means the islandness. The islandness is also going to be a Issa Erve because of Eishes Achiv. V'kedamri, yeah, V'kedamri. There's another version here that said no punkt fakert. The Mishnah is actually coming to be matter this. Kol she'isura Issa Erve, if you have a Yevamos which is a Issa Erve. Huda Asire, that she's the one that's going to be Asa. Tzarasa, the tzara is also going to be Asa. Huda Asire Tzarasa. Ha loy Isura Issa Erve, but if her Issa is not an Issa of Erve, she herself is not an Erve, but she's an islandess. She can't give birth, but really there's no other additional Issa Erve over here. Then Tzarasa lo Yasira. So then the tzara will not be Yasir, even if she herself, there's no mitzvah of Yibum for her, because she can't give birth. But for the tzara, it will not be Yasir. For the tzara, there will be a mitzvah of Yibum. Lemute mai. So what is this coming to be memayit? Amarafram lemute tzaras islandess or the loikeravasi. That was the klal of the Mishnah, that it has to be a real Issa Erve over here, and not the fact that she's an islandess. That's not enough of a reason to pater the tzara from the mitzvah of Yibum. Then it said in the Mishnah, Achaisa shehi yevimta, a sister, and she's also a Yevamos. A sister from what? The Mishnah did not spell out. Achaisa the man. Whose sister? The sister of what? So before this in the Mishnah, it mentioned a few things. It mentioned Issa Erve, it mentioned Issa Mitzvah, Issa Kedusha. So the sister of which one of these? So if you're going to say the pshat is Issa Mitzvah, she's the sister, and the other sister. So like I said, we're talking about two brothers that passed away, and both sisters have to do Yibum, and one of them was a Issa Mitzvah, which means Issa Midrabanan. So, but given the Midairaisa, Ramye Kamei, but if Minatayre, you have to do Yibum for both of these sisters, even for the one there's a Issa Midrabanan, but Minatayre, there is a mitzvah of Yibum for both of them, so how could the Mishnah say that you could do Yibum for the sister that there's no Issa Midrabanan? Paga ba'achay zikukasai. He's doing Yibum with the sister of the other sister, which is also zakuk to him. Because only with the Rabbanan she would be Asa. Ella, so the right pshat of the Mishnah is Achaisa the Issa Erve. If these two sisters that are up for Yibum, one of them is Issa Erve, so for the other sister, she's not a sister of the Zakukah, because the other one there's no mitzvah of Yibum at all. The next thing it said in the Mishnah was Issa Mitzvah Shniyos, that the Issa of Mitzvah refers to the Gzeiris Midrabanan of the Yisurim of Arayas. Why is this referred to as Issa Mitzvah? Because Mitzvah Lishmaya Divrei Chachamim. It's a mitzvah to listen to what the Chachamim instituted. That's the term mitzvah. Then it said in the Mishnah Issa Kedusha Almana L'Koyin Gadol and Grusha V'Chalutza L'Koyin Hedyet. Why does it refer to these lavim as an Issa of Kedusha? Because over there in the pasuk by the Issa to the Kainim it says Kedoshim Yiyu Lelikayim. Tanya, in the Braisa we learned Rabbi Yehuda Machlef. Rabbi Yehuda switched these terminologies. Isser Mitzvah, he said that's a term that refers to Almana L'Koyin Gadol L'Grusha V'Chalutza L'Koyin Hedyet. V'amai Karilei Issa Mitzvah. Why do we refer to these Yisurim to the Kainim as an Issa Mitzvah? D'chsev Eila Mitzvahs. Because in the end of the entire Chumash Vayikra, it finishes off with the pasuk Eila Mitzvahs Asher Tziva Hashem, and that pasuk Eila Mitzvahs refers to everything that's said in Chumash Vayikra, including these Yisurim of the Almana L'Koyin Gadol and the Grusha V'Chalutza L'Koyin Hedyet. So on that goes Eila Mitzvahs. Issa Kedusha, when it uses the term Issa Kedusha, that's the Shnius Midivrei Seifrim. That goes on the Arayis Midrabanan. Why is it referred to as Issa Kedusha? One that fulfills what the Chachamim said is called a holy individual. So Rav asks on this last point there, and what does that mean? And someone that does not fulfill what the Chachamim said, Kaddish hu d'loi mikri. So then he's not holy, he's not called a Kaddish, but Rasha nami loi mikri, but he's not going to be called a Rasha either. It's a special thing that you're doing with the Chachamim said, you're obligated. Why should you be called a Kaddish for that? So therefore Rav said the pshat is different. Kadesh atzmecha b'mutalach. The Torah says that you have to be mekadesh yourself, even with things that are permitted, and that's the basis of what the Chachamim were mekadesh, certain arayis midrabanan, to be mekadesh yourself, even with things that minat Torah is muter. So that's why these yisurim midrabanan have this name of Issa Kedusha. So the Mishnah said, Almana lekohen gadol, that an almana, if the Yevamos is now up for Yibum for the brother, and the brother's a kohen gadol, so what do? You do chalitza, and you can't do Yibum. Why? So presumably the reason is like all the things that are said in the Mishnah, the chalutza grusha, the kohen hadyet, and the mamzeres, and the nesina. These are all things that are a isser of a lav. So then there's only chalitza and not Yibum. So the Gemara kapasik vitani. The Mishnah says just the case of the almana to the kohen gadol without making any distinctions. Loishna minan nesuin. Doesn't make a difference if this almana is an almana that was married to her husband, fully married to her husband, and v'loishna min ha'erisin. Or even an almana that her husband had passed away, she was never fully married to him. There was a kiddushin, but she never had relations with him. So the Gemara, now what's the difference between the two? When it comes, as the Gemara here is going to explain, when it comes to the almana min ha'nesuin, so the reason why a kohen gadol cannot marry an almana min ha'nesuin is actually for two reasons. Number one, as Rashi here brings, there's a lav on that almana la yikach. Number two, if she had relations with her husband, so then she's a ba'ula, and on that there's a mitzvah saseh that a kohen is not allowed to marry her, a kohen gadol that is. V'hu isha b'psuleha yikach. Okay, so there's both a lav and an aseh. But when it comes to an almana min ha'erisin, it's only a lav. She's not a ba'ula yet. So therefore the Gemara asks, so if it's an almana that was already fully married, so then esa v'lois esa. So for the kohen gadol to marry her, he would be over on a esa and a lois esa. If so, ve'ein esa doiche lois esa v'asei. The esa, which is the mitzvah of yibum, would not push off the lois esa and asei, which does not allow the kohen gadol to marry her. She's an almana and a ba'ula. But if she's just an almana from Edisin, so there's only a lav here. Lois esa greiduhu. It's just a lois esa yavayese. Let the esa of the mitzvah of yibum come v'yitche lois esa, and let it push off the lois esa of almana l'kohen gadol. So there should be allowed lechatchila to do yibum and chalitza. Omar Rav Gidl Omar Rav. So Rav Gidl Omar Rav answers Omakra. The pasuk says v'alsa yevimtoi hashara, that the Yevamos should go up to the gate, and this is the pasuk where it speaks about the mitzvah of chalitza. Right in the beginning of that pasuk, it says, "V'im lo yachbet ish lekachas es yevimtoi." If he does not want to do yibum for the Yevamos, then also yevimtoi ashara, and then you do the mitzvah of chalitza. So this word yevimtoi that it says there is like the Gemara she'ein tamad loyme yevimtoi. Doesn't have to say a second time the word yevimtoi. It just says right before that, lo yachbet ish lekachas es yevimtoi. So why does it say a second time that he should also yevimtoi ashara, that the Yevamos goes up to the gate? Because it's coming to tell you that there's a second Yevamos here. Yesh lecha Yevamos acheres, the Bachas Geiris acheres here. There's another Yevamos she'oile lechalitza, that will go up, and she has an option, but she has to go ahead and do chalitza, ve'ein oile leyibum, even though she does not do any yibum. So usually, the first time it says Yevamos in the pasuk is talking about a regular Yevamos, that you have an option to do yibum, and if you now don't want to do yibum, so then you do chalitza. That's the beginning of the pasuk. But when it says again, also yevimtoi ashara, it's referring to another Yevamos that you can't do yibum for, and you still do chalitza. To what kind of Yevamos does this refer to? Chayav Lavin. It refers to the Yevamos that's Yechayev Lav, and because Yechayev Lav, so therefore you can't do any Yibum, but the pasuk is saying you still have to do Chalitza. Maybe say the same thing also regarding Chayve Krisis. Learn from here that even if there's no Yibum, but still, also Yevim Toyashara, but the Chalitza still applies, even though you can't do any Yibum. And for the Gemara, no, Omakra, but the pasuk says, Im lo yachbait ish lekachas, if the person did not want to do yibum, then you do chalitza. So what does that mean? Hachafetz miyavim. It's an option. If he wanted, he could have done yibum, which means that kol ha'ila yibum, ha'ila chalitza. That if you are available and you could do the mitzvah of yibum and you don't want, so then you do chalitza. But if you can't do yibum, ein ha'ila chalitza, and there's no option for chalitza either. So that's why by Chayve Krisis, since you can't do Yibum, you don't do Chalitza. But if that's what you learn from this pasuk, Ihachi Chayav Elaven Nami, say the same thing regarding Chayav Elaven. Since you can't do any Yibum, so you shouldn't be able to do Chalitza either. And for the Gemara, but Harabi Rachmana Yevimtai, didn't we say we have an extra word Yevimtai saying that even if you can't do the Yibum, there's still another Yibum that you do Chalitza. What do you see to say that this chalitza goes only on the chayve lavin and not on the chayve krisis? Answers the Gemara, mistavre, because it's logical to say chayave lavin tafsibu kedushin. Since we find b'chlal in other places that usually kedushin takes effect for chayve lavin, so therefore theoretically there's such a thing that you could marry her. Even though in the Chatchili you're not allowed, but there's such a thing that marriage would be typhus by her. So therefore we say over here that you do chalitza. Chayave krisis like tafsib kedushin. But regarding chayave krisis, there's no such a thing b'chlal that you have an ability to marry her. So therefore on that, you can't say that he didn't want to marry her. There's no concept b'chlal of you marrying her. So therefore, if there's no yibum, there's no concept of marrying her or yibum, so there's no inyan of chalitza either. So according to what the Gemara said until here, it comes out that when it comes to the Chayave Lavin, so Minatayra, the Chayave Lavin cannot do Yibum, but Minatayra they must do Chalitza. The Gemara is going to bring brises where we'll see that this is not so. Fragt the Gemara, Masav Rave, so Rave asked, so in the Brisa it says, Issa mitzvah ve'issa kedusha. So as we learned before, the Issa mitzvah is the Issa of our erva midrabanan, and the Issa kedusha is the Issa of a erva that's a lav, or in the reverse, according to the other opinion. So now, the Braisa says, if you went ahead and did yibum or chalitza, niftere tzarasa. So then this patters the other wife from yibum or chalitza as well. Like the halacha always is, that if one does yibum or chalitza, the other one is pattered. Fragt the Gemara, how could we apply this to the case where there's a isalav here? Now, v'isal kedaito chayav elavin midayraisa lechalitza ramye liyivum loy ramye. If you're going to say when it comes to the chayav elavin, so minatayre you could only do chalitza and yivum is b'chlal not an option. So kiba aleha, what's the Braisa saying it? The bidi yevid, if you went and you did yibum for her, amay nifter tzarasa. Why would the tzara be potter from yibum? Minatayre there is no yibum b'chlal. The Torah is saying that there's only chalitza and not yibum. So how would the tzara be pattered? Who ma'isiv la? Who mefarek la? Rava asked a question from this brisa, and Rava gave the answer, and he explained, Litzdadin katani. You have to learn the words of the brisa Litzdadin, meaning that the chalitza and the yibum that the brisa says that does not go on both cases for the issa mitzvah and for the issa kedusha. Each one goes accordingly to what it applies, as the Gemara explains here. But when it says that he did yibum issa mitzvah, that goes on Issa Mitzvah, which is the Issa Midrabanon. So regarding the Issa Midrabanon, so Minat Teire, B'di'evid, if you went ahead and did the Yibum, so the Yibum took effect, and it patters the Tzara from Yibum. Chalatzla, but then when it says Chalatzla, that he did only Chalitza, Issa Kedusha. That goes on Issa Kedusha, which refers to the Issa of a lav, where Issa for the lav, you could only do Chalitza and not Yibum. If you did Chalitza, then it'll patter the Tzara. So from this brayse, it's not a raya, not a pircha on what we said before. Masav Rave, but not Rave asked from another brayse, and here it says as follows: Petzua daka or kruz shavcha. So these are people that their reproductive organ is not properly in place. We're going to learn about this later in the Masechta, whole arichas about this, and there's a issa lav for them to marry into Klal Yisrael. Sris Adam, a person that can have children, but this is not something from birth, but something that was done later, also allow for him to get married to anybody. Or Vahazakin, a person that's older and can't give birth. There's no isser of any lav for him to get married, but still it's brought over here because what is the Braisa saying? Oy choltzin, oy miyavmin. So all of these people, they can do either chalitza or yibum. Okay, so that, of course, Rashi says, when it says over here, Oy miyavmin, this does not mean that l'chatchila they can go ahead and do yibum, because there's a lav. But what it means is, as the Braisa will soon explain, bidi yeved, even though there's a issa lav, but if they did yibum, the yibum will take effect. Now the Braisa explains that what it's speaking about over here is in two scenarios. Either the first brother was these isuri lav, or the second brother that has to do the Yibum is the Isalav. Let's see. Keitzat, so what's the cases that we're speaking about over here? Meisu, if any of these individuals that are Isalav, that were married to their wife, passed away, v'lehem achim, or actually the Bach is going to say the opposite, v'lehem noshim, so they were married to their wives, v'lehem achim, and now they had brothers that have to do Yibum, v'omdu achim, and the brothers got up, v'osu maimer bin sheseyam, and they went ahead and did maimer, which is the kedushim b'derabbanan for Yevamos. And then, what do you do after maimer if he doesn't want to remain married to her? V'nosnu get, they gave her a get, v'choltzu, and you have to do chalitza as well. Masha asu. What they did is done. It takes effect. The Yibum takes effect, or in this case, the Maimer takes effect. V'im ba'alu, and if they did Yibum, kanu. So it's kind of, the Yibum takes effect. So here we're speaking about a case where these Isurei Lavim, b'diavad, or not b'diavad, they were oived on an Isser, and they went and got married to their wives, and they passed away. So now the brother, if the brother does Maimer or Yibum, it takes effect. Now in the reverse, Meisu achim, what if the brother was married to a wife, and now the brother passed away, v'omdu heim, and now the surviving brother that's alive are one of these Isurei Lavim, whether P'tzuadaka, Kruz Shavcha, so v'omdu heim, the also maimer ben sheseyem, and either did maimer for the Yevamos, and then v'nosnu get oishacholzu, and then gave a get or chalitza. Masha asu. What's done is done. And also the Braisa adds v'im ba'alu konu. So now this brother that is doing the Yibum, if he went and did Yibum, even though it's a Isalav, we're talking over here about the Kruz Shavcha, or the P'tzuadaka, or the Sris Adam. We're not talking about the Zokin, that's not the Chiddush over here, but when you get to any of these, even though they're a Lav, but they went ahead and did Yibum, Kanu. So the Braisa clearly says the Yibum takes effect. But then the Braisa adds, V'osar l'kaimon. But even though the Yibum took effect, but nevertheless, he's not allowed to continue living with them. So this goes on this last case over here. Why? Because it's a lav. So even though the Yibum took effect, but nevertheless, he's not allowed to continue living with her. So now over here you have a clear braisa that goes against what we said before, as the Gemara spells out. If you're going to say that what we said before is true, that chayav lavin, when it comes to a woman that's a chiyav lav to the yavam, midday raisa, so you have the pasuk, the drasha that the Gemara brought before. So minat Torah we say lechalitza ramya, that she's only here for chalitza, but leyivum loy ramya, she does not have any option of yibum at all for him. So if so, imbalu amai kono. So why does it say here in this braise, if any of these Isurei Lav went and did do Yibum, that the Yibum b'diavad would take effect? Why would it take effect if there's no option of Yibum b'chlal, and even minat Torah? So here this braise clearly refutes what we said before. So Elamar Rave, so therefore Rave says differently. Going back to the original question that we asked, why by an almana l'koyin gadol, or by a grusha v'chalutza l'koyin hedyet, or any of these Isurei Lavim, why don't we say essa, the essa of the Yibum, should be deichel lois essa? So Rave says, almana mina eirisin, even when it comes to an almana mina eirisin, so we're talking about almana getting married to a koyin gadol, and it's mina eirisin. So we said before that it's only a lav, so the essa should be daichit. But the truth is, the Gemara says now, nami essa v'lois esahu. It really is a essa and a lois essa. Why? D'chsiv kedoshim yil lelikayim. Because when the pasuk says kedoshim yil lelikayim, so that's an essa on this mitzvah over here that the kohen gadol should not get married to an almana. So besides almana lo yikach, which is the lav, there's also an essa. Frek the Gemara, but this is not the only lav that we're speaking about. Mamzeres unesine ma yekelemeima. How about regarding a mamzeres and a nesine? So what can we say regarding this? That was also mentioned in the Mishnah before, that there's no mitzvah of yibum. But that l'chayre is only a lav. So the Gemara says in this, ksiv, over there the pasuk also says, v'his kadishtem. In the end of that parsha there where it speaks about all the arayis, it says, v'his kadishtem. So therefore it's also a mitzvah saseh. So it's a lav and a mitzvah saseh. Frek the Gemara, if you're going to apply this viskadishtem in the end of the parsha that speaks in general terms, that it goes also on the mamzeres and the nesine, that this is considered to be a mitzvah saseh, sihiyachi kol ha-Torah kula, Nami esav v'lo yisesuhu. So you should say that this v'skadishtem goes on every single lav in the Torah. Dichsiv v'hiskadishtem. V'hiskadishtem is not only being to mamzeres and nesina, it's b'chlal, telling a yid to listen to all the lavim in the Torah to be holy. So therefore every single lav in the Torah should be considered to be a mitzvah saseh. So therefore the Gemara refutes this pshat of Rava. Elama Rava, so Rava says another pshat. Gzeira. That when it comes to an almanim and an edison, the reason why we don't apply the mitzvah of yibum is only a gzeira midrabana. What's the gzeira? Gzeira almanim and an edison or to almanim and anisuin. In order that you should not confuse an almana that comes from edison with an almana that comes from nisuin. An almana that comes from nisuin is a essa and a lois essa. So over there's no mitzvah of yibum. So we don't want to confuse that with almanim and an edison, which is only a lav. So therefore they answered both of them. So mamzeres and nesina. So why would by a mamzeres and nesina? What would be the reason? Is what reason would there be for a gezeire there that you should not allow the mitzvah of yibum? And for the Gemara, gezeire b'makom mitzvah otu shaloi b'makom mitzvah. They made a gezeire not to do yibum for a mamzeres and a nesina because you might come to think that you're allowed to marry them even not in the place of the mitzvah of yibum. Okay, so this is a gzeira b'chlal, that we don't want you to come to marry her in any other case. If you go so far with this gzeira, so ela meyata, if so, eishes achiv meyaviv. So b'chlal, by every single case of the mitzvah of yibum, when it's the wife of your brother, from your father, which is where the mitzvah of yibum applies, loy tisyabim. You should not be able to do yibum. Why not? Gzeira mishum eishes achiv meyimai. Because then you might think that even if it's the wife of your brother, which is only your brother sharing the same mother, so and over there is no mitzvah of yibum, you might confuse the two there as well. And for the Gemara, people will not confuse that. Why not? Yibum benachla tal rachmana. The Torah clearly links the mitzvah of yibum to a brother where there's an inheritance. So people made the yediyah. People know the difference between a brother from sharing the same mother or the same father. The Gemara, isha she'ein la banim loitis yabim. A woman that passed away and there were no children, you should not be allowed to do yibum. In other words, in every case, you should not be allowed to do yibum. Why? Gzeira mishum isha sheyesh labanim. Because people might confuse that with a case where their husband passed away and they did have children. And for the Gemara, no, bebanim tal rachmana. It's clear in the Torah that the whole mitzvah of yibum is dependent on the fact that there's no children. So made the idea. That's something everybody knows. Nobody is going to confuse that. So a brother, when the mitzvah of yibum applies because you were alive when your brother was alive, you should not be allowed to do yibum. That we could confuse this in a case where the brother was born later and there's no mitzvah of yibum. Again, the Gemara says, "B'yeshiva tal rachmana." The Torah says, "Ki yeshvu achim yachtov," that it's only if two brothers were alive together. Made the idea. That's something that everybody knows. Weiter the Gemara presses on and says, "Kol hanoshim loitis tisyav mena." All women should not be allowed to do any yibum. Why not? Gzeira mishum eilanis. Why make a gzeira that just like by eilanis, there's no mitzvah of yibum, she can't have children, and people might mistake that to a woman that could have children and did not have children. And for the Gemara, that's something, an islandness is something that's very uncommon, so therefore that's not something we make a gzeira for. No, so the Gemara says, if so, going back to the point that it said in the beginning, mamzeres and nesina, nami loishchiche. To say that we're going to make a gzeira, that by a mamzeres and nesina there should be no yibum because of mamzeres and nesina, that we'll think that mamzeres and nesina could always marry into Klal Yisrael, that's also not something that's shchiach. So why would you say that there's a gzeira for such a thing? So therefore Rava gives a third pshat here. Another pshat of why Chachamim said that there's no mitzvah of yibum by an alman l'kohen gadol or any time there's a lav. Also only a gzeira midrabanan. Gzeira b'ir rishayna otu b'ir shniya. There's a gzeira here because of the first time he has relations with her, and only the first time is it a mitzvah. And the first time it's like a deiche, the essa, the mitzvah of yibum is deiche, the leis essa. Ought to be a shniya, but then people will think that he could continue living with her. And the second time, it's already not deicha anymore. There's no mitzvah anymore. So therefore, since the second time is not a mitzvah, so Chachamim asked the first time as well. Tanya Nami Yachid, we learned this in the Braisa as well. Im balu kano b'bir rishayna. If any of these cases of a issa lav did yibum, so it's kaine with the first biyah, but vasal kaimam b'bir shniya. But afterwards, you can't continue living with her because then there's no mitzvah anymore. Now the Gemara concludes and says, Hada Amar Rava. After all of this,
why didn't this come off completely?
Well, the esa deichel lois esa is only when there's b'shas you being mekayim the mitzvah. The mitzvah of yibum is only be'etzem. It's still eishes achiv because there's a esa lav over here. Elamai, when there's a mitzvah, so then the mitzvah is deichel the lav. But if the mitzvah is not deichel the lav, so then the lav still stays in place. Without the innovation, the issa of lav, the issa lav is still here. Esa deichel lois esa means the lav is still here. Elamai, but the first time it's a mitzvah is deichet. Omar Rava, now after all of this, Rava comes and says, Vaviteme Rav Ashi, or others say Rav Ashi said this, Lav milsehi damri. The answer that I gave here, that for Issa Lav, the only reason why the Essa of Yibum is not Deichet is because of Gzeirim Rabbana, because of the second Biyah, that's not true. Why? Because the answer to the original question, that the Essa of Yibum should be Deichet the Lav, is as follows. The Omer Reish Lakish said, Kol Mokim Shartamoitze Essa V'lois Essa. Anytime when you have a case where there's an essa and a lois essa, and you have a question, which one should you do? Should you push off one for the other? But if you have an option to do it in a way that you could fulfill both, so then that's of course the best. But if you don't have an option and you have to be doicha one of them, then then the essa is doicha the lois essa. So now Rava applies what Reish Lakish said to our case. So over here as well, efsher b'chalitze. Over here, since it's possible to do chalitze, the mekayim esa, so you're doing the mitzvah of chalitze for this yivame, and v'lois esa, and you weren't deichel, you didn't have to be deichel the lois esa either, whatever lav there was over here with this marriage. So therefore, why should you be deichel the lois esa? It's a case of yibum where you have an option of doing a esa of chalitze without being deichel the lois esa. So therefore, the whole question that the esa should be deichel lois esa doesn't apply. But the Gemara asks on this, Meisvei, from the Braisa that we already brought before. What did it say there? V'im ba'alu kano. That if, even in the case where there is a lav, if you went and did yibum, the yibum does take effect. But if we just said that the esa is not teichad the lois esa menatayre, because you have an option of chalitza, so then you're not allowed to do the yibum. So how did the yibum take effect? To yufte, so this refutes what Rava just said. The Hadam Arava, this that he said over here in the end, says we'll see in the continuation of the Gemara, this only refutes what Rava said, but not what Reish Lakish said. The klal that Reish Lakish said, that in the case where you could do both the Esa and the Lois Esa, that still remains. But over here, as the Gemara will explain, in a case where you could do Yibum, Chalitza is b'chlal not a mitzvah. You can't say, you have an option of Chalitza, because Yibum is the Iker mitzvah, and in such a case, the Chalitza is not considered to be a mitzvah. So if you have the mitzvah of Yibum, and you have the Lois Esa of whatever lav it is, the mitzvah of Yibum will be Deichel the Lois Esa, because Chalitza is considered to be like it's not an option. Let's see, there's another shtickle Gemara which is connected to this. We'll learn another piece. So you have to go back to the Gzeiris that the Gemara said before. The last Gzeira, the Gemara said, Bi Rishayna to Bi Shniya. So Itmer, we learned the following machlokes. Bias Kohen Gadol Balmana. If a Kohen Gadol does a Yibum or with an Almana, the Almana to the Kohen Gadol. So what's going to be b'diavad here? Rabbi Yechanan and Rabbi Lazar argued about this. Chad Amar, one of them said, Eina Paiteres. B'diavad, if they went and did Yibum, it will not pater the other tzara of Yibum. Eina Paiteres tzarasa, that is. But the other one said, Paiteres tzarasa. If b'diavad Almana did Yibum for the Kohen Gadol, it will pater the tzara. So the Gemara explains exactly what their machlokes was and in what case their machlokes is. If we're talking about an almana that was fully married once before, so she is also to the Kohen Gadol with the esa and the lois esa. Nobody's going to argue that this yibum will not pater the other wife from yibum because this yibum is not allowed b'chlal. The ein esa, deiche lois esa v'aseh, because the esa of yibum cannot push off the lois esa and the aseh that the Kohen Gadol was not allowed to marry her b'chlal. Ki pligi, when's the argument here between Rabbi Yechanan and Rabbi Lazar? B'almana min Eidison, regarding an almana that was only an almana from Eidison. So what's the machlokes? Mandama Paiteres, the one that says that this marriage, this Yibum, will pater the other wife from Yibum. In other words, this Yibum took effect. Asi Ese, Vidachi es Lois Ese. It's because the mitzvah saseh of Yibum pushes off the Lois Ese, that the Almana is not allowed to get married to the Kohen Gadol. So if he went and did the Yibum takes effect. Manda Omar Eina Piteres, and the one that says that it is not pater, loy asi esse v'dachias loy sese. The esse does not come and push off the loy sese. Why not? Kiven davshe b'chalitza. Because this is a case where the mitzvah saseh of yibum is not the only mitzvah. There's another option. You can do chalitza. So since you can do chalitza, it's not doichet, and therefore the whole yibum was not allowed. So therefore the yibum did not take effect, and it does not pater the tzara of going ahead and doing yibum. So the Gemara brings the Braisa we brought before, Meisvei, Vimbalu Kanu. The Braisa clearly says that B'diyeved, even if it's a lav, was if you went ahead and did Yibum, the Yibum does take effect. Which means that Minatayre, the Esse is Deichid Elois Esse. Could be the Zegzeirim Rabbanan, as the Gemara said before. But Minatayre, we see that it does take effect. To Yufte. So this refutes the opinion that says that the Yibum did not take effect and that it is not pater. We see clearly that the Yibum does take effect by the Almana L'Kohen Gadol, and it will pater the other wife of doing Yibum. The Gemara goes back to what we said before. Leimet heavy nami to yufte de Reish Lakish. So let this also refute the entire thing that Reish Lakish said, that any time you have a essa and a lois essa, and you have an option to do it in a way where you can be mekayim side the essa and side the lois essa. So in such a case, the essa is not doichid the lois essa. So l'chayre right over here, this should refute that concept that Reish Lakish said, because here you have a case where you have an option of doing yibum and chalitza. And nevertheless, it says that the esse of Yibum is deichid the lois esse of whatever lav it is, let's say Almana L'Kohen Gadol, even though you have another option of doing chalitza. So it's deichid the whole concept that Reish Lakish said. Amalech Reish Lakish will answer, no, in this case, it's not considered to be that you have an option. Kia minano, when was I speaking about Heiched and Mekayim mitzvah? In a case where you're actually fulfilling the mitzvah. You have the lois esse and the esse, and you could do both. You could do the mitzvah and not be doichid the lois esse. Aval hacha, but over here it's different. Chalitze, b'makim yibum, lav mitzvahi. Even though, yes, if the person does not want to do chalitze, so then, he does not want to do yibum, that is, you do chalitze, but yibum is the mitzvah. If you don't want to do the mitzvah, then you go ahead and do chalitza. But yibum is the only mitzvah really that you have. And therefore, in such a case, it is considered to be an esse that is going to be doichid the lois esse, because, and you can't say, you have an option of doing chalitza as well. You don't have an option of doing chalitza. Yibum is really the only mitzvah over here. So therefore, it doesn't refute what Reish Lakish said.